Alrighty. Thank you everybody who is slowly entering our webinar here. It is wonderful to have so many of you connecting on the day before our 1 day of spring vacation. I know some of you are waiting, delaying your travels so you can connect to the webinar, and we appreciate that. And also thanks for submitting all the questions. We have I think, diverse and varied panel of students, some who graduated last year and some who graduated a little bit longer ago. But they're all in, I think, providing some perspectives on environmental careers, kind of where you can go, what steps you need to take. And I wanted to pull them together so they could share that with you. I'm going to serve as the moderator, facilitator, but I'm going to let each of our 4 panelists introduce themselves. And, if you all would also be sure to, say what your degrees were in, right? So that we have a sense of what the different backgrounds are. So, Dani, if you want to open us up there.
Absolutely. Thanks, Dr. Quinn. My name is Dani Gibson Webb. I am located in 75 degrees finally in Boise, Idaho. I work as a conservation analyst for the Idaho Conservation League. I was a 2016 graduate of Furman in biology and sustainability science. And then I moved to Idaho a month later and started my master's research at Idaho State University. I spent the next 2 years in Pocatello, Idaho, studying social ecological systems and how those affected conservation goals within our local watershed. And then upon graduation in 2018 from my master's program, I moved over to the Boise area and have now been working at Idaho Conservation League. We shorten it to ICL, so I'll probably be saying ICL to save my breath. I've been working at ICL for a year this month, so I'm really excited to talk with everyone today and hear from all of these other awesome Furman alums. So I'll hand it over to you, Alec.
Hi, everyone. My name's Alex Schindler. I graduated Furman in 2017. I was a biology major there. Since then, I did a master's degree at Clemson University, just down the road from you all, where I worked on a project looking at how land cover and weather changes affect upland game bird abundance. Since then, I graduated from there and I'm now a PhD student at the School of Natural Resources at the University of Missouri, where sort of my focus is still in wildlife biology, working on a project looking at movement and population ecology of geese. So I would describe myself, while I am still currently a graduate student, I'm a aspiring sort of a quantitative ecologist, research biologist within the sort of wildlife biology field.
All right. Hey, everybody out there in the internet. My name is Chambers English. I am a 2019 graduate of Furman. I studied earth and environmental sciences as well as philosophy. So across the quad there. I did my senior work using GIS to study ecological factors in the forest near Furman, and that landed me a research job in South Georgia doing ecology work. Right now I work at Piedmont National Wildlife Refuge doing habitat management and prescribed burning for endangered species. And I'll be joining the Warnell School for Forestry and Natural Resources at UGA in the fall to start a master's program. So excited to be here tonight, learn from the other panelists, and engage in a good conversation.
Hey, and I am David Shelley. I'm a 1998 graduate of Furman. I majored in geology. We still had a straight geology program. The EES program was coming online at that time, but I also worked a lot and did a lot with music and history and greatly enjoyed the broad focus around the campus there. After Furman, I went to do a master's. Well, I should say at Furman, I did some research looking at stream sediments on Paris Mountain with Dr. Brandon Anderson. If he's still there, it was his first year at Furman. when I had him as an undergraduate advisor. And then after Furman, I went to New Mexico State University and did a master's in geological sciences. And from there, I spent a year at Purdue, and that PhD program didn't work out, and that's okay. That's one of the lessons. It doesn't always evolve like you think it might, and that's all right. Transferred to the University of South Carolina for family reasons and roots, brought me back here, but had a very good experience, and ended up getting an offer to work with the National Park Service here at Congaree National Park, which is downstream from Furman Lake there. And I've been here at the park for 14 years. 11 of those years, I was education coordinator, worked a lot with K-12 education, but also climate change communication, adult education, lots of stuff. And then today, I am the Chief of Resource Stewardship and Science. So I run our integrated resource management program, everything from compliance for park undertakings to feral hog control to forestry, but also the research and the education.
That is fantastic. We were actually just talking about feral hog control in my class this week. So maybe some of those students can follow up with you. We were trying to, is there a good solution or not? That makes it tricky. I do want to say for all the students who are on, there is the chat section there. So a lot of you propose questions ahead of time, but if things come up during the conversation, do not hesitate to put that in there so we can capture that, and I can follow up those questions. There might be a Q&A space as well that I can try and find. So please ask questions as we go. Let's take a start here, and any of the four of you can respond, and you guys can kind of build off what folks say. How did you decide to pursue a career in the environment? Again, this is the environment is such a broad space, but what started this for each of you?
I'll just jump in and I'll say, so I spent several years as a music, history, philosophy, Spanish major at Furman, and I had to take a geology course. And we had an adjunct professor who's now Dr. Chris Barker, teaches at Stephen F. Austin University in Texas, last I heard, and he just made it come alive. And I had not had a science course in 5 years. And it was like, where have you been all my life? And, as a kid, I would play in the creek, and he goes, well, here's the model and the mathematics for that. And I was like, oh. And so it really just kind of, awakened a spark that was there, and I had never looked back. And I was always, that kid with the snakes and the frogs and wet and muddy in the creek and pulling out snakes at the piano recital kind of thing. So it kind of made sense. And I could have gone biology, could have gone geology, either way. But honestly, for me personally, sedimentation and stratigraphy was the course that really just kind of really took my imagination off.
Yeah, I'll say for me, I kind of a similar background in the sense that probably like a lot of you grew up definitely with the passion for the outdoors. And for me in particular, I always kind of liked animals and wanted to study animals and didn't really know what sort of like career paths there were for that. So when I came to Furman, I was just general biology major. Didn't really know specifically what direction I wanted to go. And then just kind of learning a little bit more about sort of the ecology from some classes I had at Furman, and then got the chance to work in Dr. Quinn's lab doing a research project, doing some avian ecology work. And sort of that's kind of what really sparked my love and passion for, this whole research aspect of things, and why I want to pursue a career as a research biologist. Really just enjoyed that whole process and have continued to do so throughout grad school. And then just kind of along the way, different steps, you kind of learn what you enjoy just from reading different things, from looking at all kinds of different studies and working on different projects. You kind of learn what you like, what you enjoy studying the most. And sort of that's kind of how, as things have progressed from undergrad to my master's and now my PhD project, sort of how I shaped the sort of career direction I wanted to go.
Just to echo a theme from Alex talk there, I grew up in the outdoors and really love being outside, but not until Furman did I start putting the pieces together as to why the outdoors might matter in a bigger picture beyond my experience. So classes like sustainability and conservation biology help see the natural world in a broader context for all of society and for the natural world itself in a way that should be protected and used for the benefit of everyone, including the world itself. So it's been an arc and a winding road, but still figuring that out.
Chambers, you could have not set me up more perfectly. I grew up kind of just wanting to be an activist. I remember growing up as a kid and telling my dad that I wanted to be the Jane Goodall for the Florida Panthers. And I have just always wanted to save the world. That literally is just what I wanted to do. And I couldn't ever imagine doing anything else. And so I chose Furman because of their undergraduate sustainability science program, because at the time it was the only undergrad sustainability science program in the country. When I got there, I realized that I wanted even more biology and wildlife ecology in my education. And so I added my double major with biology onto that. But I've always been really interested in how the things that we do in the environment, what that means for people and that intersection between social systems and ecological systems. And so I realized through my experiences that what I'm really passionate about is environmental advocacy. I want to get people to care about the environment and do things to conserve the environment. I'm not interested in just studying it for the sake of studying, but I want to do research that is meaningful and that gets people to take action to protect the air you breathe, the land you enjoy recreating on, the animals you care about, the water you enjoy and can drink. And so that what really drove me towards this environmental advocacy route that I'm at now. So.
Well, that's a lovely arc too, right? Where David, your first job with the national parks was in education. Danny, now working to advocate, and part of that is education. But all the research that has to go on in the middle and knowledge gained to different spaces. I'm curious if, and you guys, we don't all, you are all welcome to respond to every question. But if a couple of you mentioned some undergraduate experiences in that kind of helped inform where you landed. I mean, a couple of you mentioned research. Were there classes, study away, internships, or things like that kind of helps see, oh, this is either something I don't want to do, or this is something I really want to do.
If I may, John, I will say that like short term, right after school, my undergraduate research with a phenomenal advisor really played a major part in my next hiring move. Every job and position is a stepping stone. And I was fortunate enough to have Dr. Quinn as one of my advisors for my senior research. And that project incorporating GIS and ecological models with remote sensing set me up for a year-long research job with a landscape ecology lab in South Georgia. But yeah, the relationship you have with your advisor during your research matters. And I'm sure our graduate students on the panel can attest to this as well, but having previous bosses and advisors be able to speak highly of you, write a good letter, answer the phone when a job calls, that matters. But early in my college career, I was leaning more towards the sustainability route, like a planning, even environmental law. Those were all fields that I was, and to some degree still am considering. But I studied away on the wild semester in New Mexico, and worked a summer out there doing wildlife research. And that steered me away from the office for many years. So I'm still trying to find a balance between the outdoors that that motivated me to start this work, and the office style research and analysis, planning and advocacy that get a paycheck and get the job done. So that's kind of where my arc is heading right now.
I would echo that with the field experiences and the research. I mean, it was really the field trips with a lot of the geology and EES professors that, you know, you're learning out of class, and that's just such a rich opportunity. And I remember early on when I'm looking at a geology major and what that means, I'm like, well, I probably can't do research, you know, and I felt really, really timid. But then that research progress, I mean, we got a peer-reviewed publication out of that eventually. And I remember staying up late at night, you know, counting sand grains under a microscope for that project, listening to Emmylou Harris Wrecking Ball album over and over again. But that research experience and just being able to learning to critically think like that really lit that fire. And when I went to New Mexico State, that was a research, you know, pure geology research. And that's what I did PhD in as well. So, but all in sedimentology kind of, I was able to find that sedimentology field, but also the advisors to make it come alive and make it work.
So maybe to build off of that a little bit, you know, what do you guys do day to day, right? I mean, do you get to go outside and you run around in the woods and, you know, count sand grains? Or, you know, are you sitting staring at a computer all day long?
I can start. So I am doing what it seems like Chambers would hate. I am in my home office. We're still working from home, but I do data analysis for our climate campaign to try to make Idaho carbon neutral. And what I bring to the team is a strong analytical and technical background that I obtained through my classes and my research experience at Furman that led me to graduate school. And so most days I'm reading through documents and watching videos if I can find videos that are relevant, and going through lots and lots of spreadsheets and trying to find publicly available, legitimate data that can help us reach our goals. A lot of it is focused on the energy sector, but I'm also really trying to improve upon our climate work as it relates to our work in public lands and wildlife conservation, and kind of the intersection with wildfire issues in the West has been something that I've been working on really recently. So looking at what these land managers are trying to do to prevent wildfires from being too horrible or too bad, and making sure that that resiliency is there, especially in the light of increasing climate change. So lots of data analysis and GIS and R and tons of Excel sheets. But when you know the end goals are what's going to actually make the change occur and make people care, the not getting to go outside as frequently as one might like is totally worth it.
I'll go and just provide sort of a little bit of a different perspective as a graduate student in sort of wildlife biology, and a lot of similar fields are kind of the same as well. So as a grad student, I kind of have several different roles I have to do at the same time. So obviously one is taking classwork. But that's honestly, as a graduate student, it's actually a lot lower of a time commitment than it is in, say, an undergrad. A lot of the classes, you know, for example, I typically only take one class a semester as a PhD student, and as a master's student, I only took like two a semester. And a lot of it's, you know, not as much sort of day-to-day work. It's more like long-term projects and a lot of discussions in your class, and maybe some labs where you do things in R or something like that. So that's a small part. as a graduate student, I also have sort of a dual research assistantship and teaching assistantship. And so I don't have to teach every semester, but some semesters I do have to teach as well. For example, I got to teach an ornithology lab, which was pretty fun. And then I also taught a sort of the intro to biology class for majors, that kind of lab as well. But the majority of my time, honestly, is spent doing sort of data analysis, a lot of reading, a lot of coding in R, doing GIS and stuff like that. So that's probably the majority of how I spend my day. I also do fieldwork for my dissertation project as well. For example, for my project, I get to go to Ireland and catch geese. We shoot nets out of a cannon at geese and then put GPS collars on them. So it's a lot of fun. Unfortunately, I didn't get to do that because of the pandemic this year, but I did get to do help out with some other projects in my lab at Missouri and help catch some other birds as well. So I do definitely get to spend some time out in the field as well. But
I would say where I am with the National Park Service, I think it is true that the higher up you move, the more removed you are from the field. Oftentimes, but I still get outside a lot, and I get to do, some field time. Some days it's paddling on the creek. The other day we were, hosting a VIP around the boardwalk, or we're out prepping fire line or doing, different activities like that. But a lot of what I do is on a computer. With COVID, I've been teleworking most of the time, but where we are programmatically, we're doing a lot of planning. So I'm doing a lot of writing. That's actually one of the biggest things that I think I took away from Furman is the quality of writing that you get in every domain and discipline, getting hammered on all those assignments from economics to philosophy to science courses. And writing is a really, really huge feather in your cap, I guess. Might not be a good one to use with some birders on here. But that's a good benefit, I think, of a Furman experience. But a lot of what I do too is budget management and personnel management, and we do legal compliance. So looking at the park wants to install a boardwalk. Well, what does that have to do with the National Environmental Policy Act or National Historic Preservation Act? And I have staff that help me, but that's a lot of what I coordinate. Also coordinate research permits and coordinate some communications still from my old education position was under my position now. So I still work a lot in those fields too. So it really varies, but I like that variability.
Well, and maybe that makes this next question maybe not a good one, but where do you see, what sort of space do you see the most demand for environmental jobs in the next 5 years? This was one of the questions from one of the students, and we can pair this with one of the kind of the standard ones is, what advice do you have post-graduation, right? Chambers, you're 1 year out, the other, 4 or 5. But, David, what are you hiring for, right? If you're, or Danny too, I don't know if, where that kind of hiring stand is. It's like, what are you looking for in that spaces and what are the openings that you anticipate in the next 5 years?
I guess, for me, I hire a lot of interns right now. And we can talk, there's a whole separate rabbit hole of talking about federal jobs and interviews. Like there's a lot that goes into the federal hiring process. It takes a long time to get on permanently, but internships are a great way to get that networking. And Chambers, what program is your internship hosted with Fish and Wildlife Service?
I'm actually through SCA, Student Conservation Association.
Yeah, so there's several good internship programs that we work with, anywhere from a 12 to a 20-week basis, often project focused for interns. As far as, what are the biggest career options? I actually have to use, I was looking at this question and came up with the idea of a Lego ship, that we're all in this together and not every job, not everybody gets to be the shiny blue windshield on the Lego ship that you see. Every job and career is a brick in there somewhere though. So everything from civil engineering on kind of the waste management end of things to the frontline rangers working at the National Park Service to the advocacy and conservation organizations. Danny, and everybody in between, and the researchers that are underpinning it, and the IT folks that are making the world spin, keeping us all connected. So at the end of the day, I think sometimes our career options feel smaller than we have vision for when we're in undergrad and we see all these possibilities. At the end of the day, we're going to, cover a suite of them over a course of a career. The biggest thing I think in terms of, you ask about things to do, and I've come up with a list working with former interns, but is chasing a lot of physical experience, safe experience with certifications, everything from CPR and first aid, wilderness first responder. If you have that opportunity, red card for wildland firefighting. If you've got it, go for full EMT, herbicide applicator license. There are opportunities for volunteer firefighting. I knew a volunteer firefighter who was a Furman student when I was there. Commercial driver's license or defensive driving. Those are skills that employers at land management agencies are going to look for folks that have those abilities. Also, there might be things like chainsaw, small engine maintenance, ORVs, boating, heavy equipment, firearms, radios, trailering. Those are all very practical skills that are going to come into play if you're in a field-based or position that has field applications. There are also a lot of other online trainings you can do. Things like incident command system, which is what's actually used for coordinating special events or wildland fire scenarios. That's coordinated through FEMA, but it's used nationwide. So everybody from municipal emergency response personnel are going to be trained in that, all the way through state agencies and federal agencies. And I can pass a list of some of this stuff to Dr. Quinn, but also just getting involved with master naturalists or natural history, looking for opportunities to get involved with organizations like that. It's kind of a suite of things there.
Another thing I can add is that if you are interested in doing something environmental, like, you don't have to go about it from a scientific perspective. At our nonprofit, we have people who reach out to major donors and reach out to people for grants. We have a marketing team. We have people who their whole job is just getting the community involved on environmental issues. And then if that's what you want to do, if you are interested in like videography, you can do that at an environmental organization. You can literally do whatever you want, whatever you're passionate about, and you can find that in the environmental field. You just have to be a little bit more specific and maybe be a little bit broader in your geographical scope. Maybe move to Idaho to get the right position. Step out of that comfort zone if that's something that you really want to do. But you aren't limited by what you study in school, or you can use what you studied in school to your advantage. And I think that a lot of the things that we learn at Furman is really beneficial because of that broad liberal arts education. I mean, I came to the table, not only did I have a strong research background in conservation biology, but I also knew economics and social science and environmental policy from the different classes that I took at Furman. And that's been really helpful. So I think if you want to do something that's in the environment, but you think you're not good at science, who cares? You can still do it and really make a difference. And it's those people that can take what us who are kind of more of the technical researchy people make what we do meaningful and reachable for people. And that's super, super important.
Well, and maybe I can use that and I just messed up my screen, so I don't remember what the question was, but what are the skills that you all use like on a day-to-day basis? Some of that came up. I mean, I heard GIS, Excel spreadsheets and R, but if you guys want to, summarize that for a moment.
If I may, for just a moment, I think GIS and the quantitative skills that come with it and other software applications are some of the key hard skills that EES and bio majors should take with them. If you're in either of those majors and you're on the science end of things, you should have those classes. Just working through a pandemic economy, I stayed on at my previous position because of my software experience. And I teach my bosses how to use GIS at my current position. Those are skills that will keep you employed. So yeah, that's important. And if you can get a programming background in GIS, you're set. But hard skills right now, on the ground, in my current land management and prescribed burning position, a lot of what Dr. Shelley was referring to, get certifications, get experience. I think there's tremendous opportunity for Furman to partner with the, I guess, Clemson and other state and federal agencies to get some certification opportunities for students, because in the state and federal arena, those matter big time. So I've got my firefighter type 2 red card, and I'm working on other certifications for this position. But yeah, those are some field skills. I use a lot of power tools and manual labor right now. So I think there's a bit of a glorification of office and like long-term work that I bought into at Furman, and there is satisfaction and like enjoyment to be had doing manual labor. Maybe not forever, maybe not all of your job, but seeing tangible change happen on the ground is very rewarding.
Yes, I would just tell us out. I think being able to, what Furman teaches you about note taking, so either reading or processing information and being able to capture that and organize it as you kind of have to do in all your classes that are demanding, that's huge in meetings and kind of catching up to speed on things efficiently.
One of the biggest things that particularly the sustainability science major helped me with was thinking in systems and understanding systems specifically, and being able to view things very, very wide lens and how different systems interact with each other was something that I don't think I necessarily appreciated at the time on how important it would be. But working in the field of climate change, where it's all a very large, integrated, super complicated system, having that background has actually made me very, very valuable on our team. So
I'll just add a few more, I guess, research-based skills too, that some of which we've talked about, like software, like Chambers talked about, like GIS, we've already mentioned R, are becoming super important in a lot of sort of research-related fields. We already talked about ability to critically read and write a lot. Some other things I would add too is, especially in like sort of the research fields, it's getting very, things are shifting a lot more towards being very quantitative. So having some sort of math or statistics background, even if you don't get a chance to take a lot of those classes at Furman, trying to take them when you're in grad school or something like that are also super helpful. Some other just kind of general skills too, obviously something you don't always think about when you're in sort of environmental careers, but people skills is very important. There's really not a whole lot we can do without collaborating with a lot of people. So pretty much all of our jobs involve collaborating with teams of people. So being able to, either lead a group of people or work within a group of people is all very important. And then one more thing that I would add too is, the ability to sort of work on a long-term project and set kind of goals for yourself along the way. I know that was kind of one of the biggest adjustments for me going into grad school, moving from an undergrad where you have a lot of semester-long goals, right? And then when you move towards working on longer-term projects that might not be finished for 2, 3, 4 years, it's really easy to sort of get discouraged and I think that you're doing a whole lot, but you really have to sort of set goals for yourself and sort of work through those along the way and kind of plan for the long term on a lot of those projects as well.
That long-term planning is spot on. I had written down project management. I mean, I've come to think about a master's degree as a good example to kind of prove your project management skills, and a PhD is there's something, go figure it out. So that's spot on. I do think it's true that in the research realm, things are moving to very quantitative. I would say on a more management end of things, I think historical ways of knowing are very, very important too. And we are actually giving a lot of deference into traditional ecological knowledge of different indigenous groups that, it's not a scientific framework, but it's a different way of knowing. And they're spot on. I mean, they've been, living in this area for thousands of years, so they understand so much about the relationships and the systems, Danny, that you were talking about. But I do think, so oftentimes, like in a policy context, we don't have a statistically valid sample to make a decision on. So like when you're trying to control feral hogs, the statistics are just really hard to get in 1 year, but you kind of have more of a case study approach or alternatives. And so I think some of what the humanities with the broader liberal arts focus at Furman can bring is an ability to think in those sorts of heuristics and epistemologies, those ways of knowing and evaluating decisions with limited information. Because at the end of the day, you can talk all about, the American westward expansion and the wilderness experience. Well, for me at the park, wilderness compliance is a series of check boxes. And is this decision right? Is it approved or is it not? And I'm not saying that's all it is, but it does boil down to that level where you have to make decisions, and not moving is a decision. I'm not disagreeing with you, Alec, at all, but it's kind of tempered on the management end of things in some organizations.
Well, I think it captures, the same way what Danny said, right? To be involved in the environment is everything from, hands-on manual labor to understanding history to communicating, working in teams, and quantitative analyses. And so hopefully, the students on the panel, right, can kind of hear like, there's a spot for me if I would like to do this. And there's one question in here, that talks about a majoring in art and sustainability science, right? There are opportunities for that. And David, I don't know if you want to, I saw 2 thumbs up there. If you want to comment on that in any specificity, if anyone else does.
Well, throw it out if other folks have an idea. I do have some, but I was just going to say, in the National Park Service or in the federal realm, it'd be called a visual information specialist. So somebody who's got that background is able to communicate. So I worked in science communication for so long and climate change communication, and you can get into the weeds of cognitive psychology and color choice and order of presentation and fonts and how you present ideas. That matters. I also know artists that have outperformed science majors on plant and animal IDs because they are able to pay attention to things. If I was going to draw that, and so those visual skills are incredibly powerful and useful, from visual information specialists roles to technical illustration, lots of different options there.
And just as an example, here at ICL, we have an annual artist in residence, and it's someone who is supported, and we share their artwork through our nonprofit. So someone who does lots of environmental artwork and really shows the beauty of Idaho. We take those wonderful artists and can use our platform to share that with our members and use that as fundraising efforts and that sort of thing. So, I mean, honestly, the sky is the limit. The environment affects everything. And if you are interested in environmental economics or the business side of the environment, or I'm trying to think of things that are don't seem congruent. I mean, you don't have to be a biology or an environmental scientist to do meaningful environmental work.
I have an advocate strain in my personality that I'm still feeling out how it manifests. I'm involved with some local and regional conservation nonprofits here in Georgia, but I've found that my advocacy can butt against the ethical restraints of working in the federal government, being a lobbyist. So that's a real limitation that I've come against. But really, if there is some advocacy that can be done without being in the field itself. This is not knocking advocates professionally. We need them, Danny. Shout out to you. But like people in other professions who care about the environment matter as well. And I think I may have gotten tunnel vision while at Furman, that because at sometimes I've talked with other people who experience this as well. They're going to nursing school now. They care about the environment so much, but there's ways to care about the environment outside of environment specific career paths. John, you can boot me off now if I derailed it, but just something to consider, everybody back home watching.
I'd also just like to add that like volunteering with different nonprofits or various groups like volunteering at local schools to help teach science or anything like that, like it doesn't necessarily have to be a career either. So trying to kind of close the loop on, I think what Chambers was saying is like exploring volunteer work on your own personal time, if it's something that you're really involved in and interested in, can really help those organizations achieve their goals. Because I mean, there's a lot of times where we wouldn't get trails cleaned if it wasn't for our volunteers and our members. So
I would say too, I think, like at the National Park Service, we need folks in IT, folks that do budget, folks that do, law enforcement, folks that do our interpretive programming. So there are all sorts of roles, even within large organizations as well. And, on the advocacy front, sometimes it is hard. And I really appreciate that, Chambers, because, we talk about when we do climate communication, climate change, the National Park Service, we are not advocates. And, that line's kind of, it when you see it, but that doesn't mean that we can't be factual presenters of information and open and upfront. And we can be, here when folks go to a place like a national park and they remember coming there as a kid and all of a sudden it's different, we can say, yeah, that's climate change. That's the reality that we face as managers. I don't have to apologize for that. And I've hosted senators that don't believe in climate change, but we can still find common ground and, come to, hey, that's really cool that you restore trees on your property there, and have that conversation and still build those bridges. But it takes all kinds. It takes the advocacy, it takes the regulatory branches too, which is another whole facet that I have not done, but we need regulators to go out there that have legally enforceable, mandates and activities, but also the managers in the partnership building, especially when it comes to issues of environmental justice. We are in a larger community at Congaree National Park, and we want to be a good neighbor, but part of that larger group. So we're recognized as UNESCO International Biosphere Reserve. And so we just have completed, you talked about how long things take. In the summer of 2018, we started a partnership agreement, and literally today I have the signatures on the final approved agreement. So yes.
So, Chambers, I would not have asked you if I didn't anticipate that, right? So that's not quite a curveball. There was a specific question about art and sustainability science. There was another specific one for the two biology majors, and so I'll pair this with another one. How did you determine what you were going to do, with your undergraduate degrees or after your undergraduate degrees? Expanding that out to everyone, what do you wish you had known? This is, I think, one of the best questions in the sense of, you all have progressed forward in your pathway post Furman, but what you're like, oh, I wish I had known this, when I was graduating.
So I've talked a little bit, I guess, about how and when I decided. It was really once I had that first experience, and first in the research analysis class, and then working in Dr. Quinn's lab, sort of with my senior thesis project there at Furman. That's kind of when I really started to know exactly the pathway I wanted to do. I was super passionate about wildlife and conservation, but really passionate about the research side. And so just kind of looking and exploring that kind of avenue is then what sort of brought me to grad school. And then sort of that's why I progressed, a lot of sort of the research oriented, it's not always the case, but a lot of the research oriented jobs sort of require you to get the PhD after the master's degree, and a lot of the sort of more like management oriented jobs a lot of times stop after the master's degree. So that's kind of why I've gone on through that way. But I guess some things that I wish I would have known, I guess first off is like how important the additional experiences are in addition to just like your coursework. I got lucky in that Dr. Quinn was my research and analysis professor for that class. And so I just kind of happened to run into him that way and get started talking about some of that stuff. But it would have been nice to have known that, you know, to reach out to your professors about these opportunities, find someone at Furman who's studying something that is interesting to you, and see if there's a way where you can work with them on some sort of project. Outside of that, there are also plenty of other opportunities elsewhere that you could do over the summer, working as like a wildlife technician or in other careers too, like forestry or fisheries or whatever, working as a technician or something like that over the summer. So there are lots of different ways, internships and things like that, where you can get that additional experience, but that's super important for being competitive for first graduate school and then moving on. I guess another thing that I think is important to know that I didn't know is that in a lot of the sort of science fields, particularly where you have some sort of assistantship, like a research assistantship or a teaching assistantship, along with your graduate school is like free, and you can have a stipend too. So you essentially get paid to go to grad school. And so a lot of people think that they can't go to grad school or can't afford to, or don't want to take out a loan or whatever. But you don't have to do that. There are plenty of avenues in where you can get paid to go to grad school, essentially. So.
I thought I wanted to do what Alex is doing. At Furman, I loved research projects and I loved research. And so I knew I wanted to get my master's because that was the next step in getting your PhD, and I wanted to do research. And so then I went to start my master's project, and I hated it. I hated the academic field. It was very competitive. It wasn't conducive to my mental health, and I had a breakdown. And so I was like, nope, can't stick out this for a PhD. This is not going to be good for me in the long term. And I found myself really missing why what I was doing mattered. I didn't care if other researchers who were looking at social ecological systems were reading what I was doing. I wanted it to actually have meaningful impacts on communities and on the people that I've been trying to do this for. And so that led me to the nonprofit world. And now I get to do little miniature research projects that have a purpose. And so it took me a while to figure out exactly that it was like basically like advocacy research, I guess, was really what I wanted to do. And it took some trials and errors. I mean, I was applying for every environmental job that I thought was interesting for the first 2 years that I was in Boise. And it was really hard. And I kept having interviews and I kept not getting the job. And then this position with ICL opened up last year, and I read it and I was like, okay, I've done some work in climate, but not a ton, but this just feels right. And it all worked out because it was the right fit for me. And so I guess just the trial and error and not being afraid to step out of your comfort zone or just apply for the job. I mean, the worst that can happen is they say no and you move on to the next one. And it is discouraging, especially as a high achieving Furman student, where you're used to being the best and getting the best. So, you know, that's really hard, but I think just being able to stick through it is super important, and you'll figure it out as you go, and you don't have to have everything figured out when you're graduating from college or even when you're 27. So hang in there, guys, and y'all will be fine.
I would just piggyback off that and say, where I am now, I have had to hire interns and I've had to send ding letters to really highly qualified candidates that had a great resume. I really enjoyed the phone interview. Gosh, in an ideal world, they would be on the team, but for various reasons, there's another candidate that's come up. And
I still don't, you can't pad or sugarcoat a letter like that. It's hard when you get that letter. I know that. But as somebody who's had to write it, it really is a hard decision sometimes, an unfortunate one to have to make because you can't hire everybody.
Yeah, I think that. Oh, go ahead, Chambers.
I was just going to say, I applaud Dr. Shelley's decency in writing letters because not every job will write a letter or give you a call back. Those sting too, and they happen. It's okay. I saw a question. John, can I answer a question that popped up in the, okay. I'm a philosophy major. Is there anything I regret about the biology EES track? I took a lot of bio courses related to the wild semester, so I'm like half and half, something like that. Anyway, I had to make a choice between my favorite philosophy class and botany my senior year. And I chose the philosophy class, social and political philosophy with Dr. Anderson. To this day, I am still learning botany skills. That is another class you should try to get before leaving. But because I appreciate the socio-economic and political context in which conservation happens and the rhetoric by which we accomplish longer term goals, I'm 100% satisfied with my choice to take that class and continue with the major.
No, Chambers, that's a great answer. So unless you're applying for a federal job, you need 9 credits of botany.
That's still neat.
That's the brutal thing for a federal job.
That might get me one day.
So I appreciate the question from Amanda. If there are other students who are listening and would like to, put something in the chat in the Q&A, we only have our guests for about 6 more minutes. So I will ask the most open-ended question here. Number 10, if there was anything you could do to protect the environment, what is that? And so if you guys have any thoughts on that, and we'll kind of wait, to see if any of the other students drop something into the Q&A or chat there. It's always the hardest question because it is so complicated.
Yeah, I don't have any great insights into anything that you haven't probably already heard 1,000 times. So I'll just say a random one that I thought of is from a research perspective, participate in community science data projects. There's so many community science projects where you can as a just regular citizen collect data that's then used for science projects. For example, I am working on sort of a side project where I'm using eBird data. That's probably one of the biggest examples, but there's tons of other ones where some really great science comes from data collected by sort of just everyday citizens.
Do you feel like we need a random environmental action wheel, spin the wheel and here's what you can do?
I think the promise of high-speed internet in rural places and the coming of AI and further automation of human jobs leaves a great opportunity for humans to leave urban places and go back to rural places and grow their own food and live more sustainably in their communities and care about the natural world. To care about the natural world, you have to live in and around it and experience it. And a lot of the world is not experiencing the natural world right now in highly concentrated urban areas. A little window right there.
So we had 2 come up here at the end. One more in the chat here is, to talk about graduate school funding opportunities. And so, all 4 of you attended graduate school. Maybe I'll summarize, I think the most important part here, and if you guys want to add anything, is there are lots of funding opportunities for graduate school, whether as a research assistant where you're, participate in a particular project, as a teaching assistant where you teach classes, which is a great way to engage in, the fundamentals of science and practice these other skill sets. But also, you can get research opportunities. A professor might have it, but you can also write your own. National Science Foundation, USDA have different funding spaces there. From the environmental side, I will say the best spot is the Texas A&M Job Board. So if you have not looked at that, that is like the default space. As a plug for the Furman Biology Department, we have on our departmental Moodle page, there's that information. You can always email me. And I think these last two maybe go together nicely, right? We have one, I guess, rising freshman who joined us, and I love that. And she just asked a question there. So I'll ask this broadly, if maybe we can end with a statement here. Those of you who are combining interest in multiple fields, whether it's philosophy of the environment or public health and the environment, how do you make a career? How do you combine those, for your passions? You get, 1 minute each.
I think that the best thing is take what you're passionate about and just go with it. There are intersections with everything. Climate impacts our public health, climate impacts our wildlife species, climate impacts our ability to have hydropower. It affects everything. And that's just one example that is present in my mind because that's what I do every day. But you can absolutely make a career out of whatever it is that you are passionate about and that you care about. If that's what you want to do. But also you don't have to make what you're passionate about into a career either, because it's very easy to get burnt out if it's what you're doing all day, every day. So if that becomes the case, then take a step back, think of, okay, well, what's something that I can do that isn't necessarily so draining, and then I can pursue my passion project through volunteering or through my own personal projects and hobbies. You don't have to put so much pressure on yourself to have the perfect job, because no job is perfect. You can have a great career that addresses the things that you're interested in, and you will find those experiences through your life. And when you make connections and have experiences and like, oh, this makes sense. But don't put so much pressure on yourself to find the perfect job, because that's literally impossible. And at the end of the day, it's a job, and you are more valuable and you are more than your career, is I think what I want to end with.
I would jump in, or go ahead.
No, go ahead. I was going to support Dady in that. It's like there's so David, please follow up.
Well, I was going to say, public health is huge, because public health is climate change, it's waterborne illness, it's zoonotic disease, it's water quality, it's air quality. There's so much going on at that intersection of culture and look at issues of environmental justice. That's where public health really, I think, comes through. We've started working with the Arnold School of Public Health at University of South Carolina, and they've got ecotoxicologists and all sorts of great folks that do a wide range of things. So public health is awesome. Just be creative, find those connections. And one thing I was going to come back to, you talked about everything you can, or something you can do today to help protect the environment. Grab a family or friend, several of them, and on different trips, go tour all of your utility and waste stream outcomes. Go to the water treatment plant, go to your local landfill, go to your MRF, your materials recycling facility, go tour your electric grid, go see where these utilities come from and your waste streams go. And if that doesn't change your life, then we have something else to talk about. And drag people who wouldn't otherwise go with you. Small groups.
Chambers wants us to go out and, be in the forest, David, let's go out and, see. I remember the first time I went to a landfill, right? You're struck by the volume there. It is pretty amazing. So I want, maybe we'll wrap up here, but if, are you all, if students have other questions, comfortable, with, me sharing your emails, and because I think, you all have a lot more information, it's fun chatting with the folks, with all of you again. But I think we could probably sit here for another 2 hours and keep talking. For those, for all of you and the students, Furman would like to do more of these. So hopefully, we'll do it again next semester. But thank you, everybody. And we'll be in touch soon.